All right, let's set the scene. We are standing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, literally moments before one of the greatest wars in history is about to begin. We're going to get right inside the mind of a commander, Prince Duryodhana, by looking at 3 key verses to see exactly how he's sizing up his army, his strategy, and his chances of victory.
So this is really the core question we're exploring today. How does a leader prep for a war they are absolutely convinced they cannot lose? On one side, you've got the Pandavas, and on the other, the Kauravas, led by Duryodhana. And right now, he's talking to his teacher, Drona, laying out exactly why he thinks this is all just a formality.
You know, his assessment doesn't start with battle formations or tactics. Nope, it starts with people. He's doing a roll call, cataloging the strength, the skill, and, maybe most importantly, the loyalty of the warriors fighting for him. This is all about counting his assets.
And here it is, the first verse in its original Devanagari script. I mean, even before we translate it, you can just feel the power and the weight of these words, can't you? This is the very foundation of his confidence.
Okay, let's dive right in. Just listen to the sound of the transliteration for a moment. Anyecha bahava shura, mad arthe tyakta jivitaha, nana shastra praharana, sarve yuddha visharadaha. You can almost hear the confidence in that rhythm. He's talking about heroes, and not just a few, but heroes in great numbers, ready to risk their lives. And for what? For his sake? That's a huge statement.
And here's the full translation. The message is just so simple and, frankly, overwhelming. He's saying, look around. I am surrounded by a massive army of highly skilled, well-armed warriors, and every single one of them is ready to die for me. What an opening statement.
So let's unpack that. The crucial point here is that his confidence isn't just in himself. It's in the overwhelming number and the supposed loyalty of his allies, people like Jayadratha and Shalya. But, there's a really dark undertone here. It's said that by joining his sinful cause, their fate was already sealed. Just think about that from a leadership perspective. He's boasting about men whose deaths he sees as a foregone conclusion, a necessary sacrifice for his victory.
So, after he's taken inventory of his own assets, Duryodhana makes a pivot. He shifts to a direct comparison, a cold, strategic calculation of his enemy's strength measured against his own.
And this is the second verse. This is where that confidence we saw really transforms into a declaration of total, undeniable superiority. He's not just counting his men anymore, he's measuring them against the Pandavas and finding them wanting.
Listen to how this sounds. Aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishma bhirakshitam. Paryaptam tu edam etesham balam bhima bhirakshitam. The contrast is baked right into the language. You have aparyaptam, which means immeasurable, versus paryaptam, which means limited. He's creating this incredibly powerful, almost dismissive divide between the two sides.
And the translation is just so stark. He doesn't say his strength is greater, he says it's immeasurable. He doesn't say their strength is weaker, he says it's limited. These are absolute, non-negotiable terms. In his mind, this isn't even a fair fight. It's already over. Now, what's really interesting here is how his entire logic is laid bare. See, it all comes down to the generals. His army? Perfectly protected by the most experienced general on the field, Bhishma. The Pandavas? Protected by Bhima, who Duryodhana basically sees as, and I quote, a fig in the presence of Bhishma. This isn't just an assessment, it's a total dismissal. And that level of hubris, well, that can be a commander's greatest blind spot.
So, what do you do when you believe you have an immeasurable force and a vastly superior general? You issue a command, right? And Duryodhana's final verse in this assessment is exactly that. One single, absolutely critical order for all of his warriors. Here it is. This is the command. It's the actionable conclusion to his whole thought process. The assessment is done. Now it's time for strategy.
Let's listen. Ayeneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagam avastitaha bhishmam eva birakshantu bhavantaha sarve eva hi. The key phrase that just jumps out is Bhishmam eva birakshantu, give support to Bhishma. It's a direct, unambiguous, no-nonsense order.
And the translation makes his entire strategy crystal clear. He's saying to every single hero on that field, hold your positions, but above all else, your #1 job is to protect Grandfather Bhishma. And this just brilliantly illustrates the paradox in his thinking. Despite claiming this immeasurable strength, his entire hope for victory hinges on one single man. Now, he's being diplomatic, telling his other generals to hold their strategic points, to make them feel important. But the real goal is to create a human shield around Bhishma. He knows Bhishma is old, and he feels like everything depends on him. He has put all his eggs in one basket.
So, let's put this all together. We've seen Duryodhana count his heroes, we've seen him compare the two armies, and we've heard him issue his final critical command. We've essentially traced his logic from start to finish.
Here it is, his three-step logic, laid out plain and simple. First, inventory. I have an overwhelming force. Second, comparison. My force is infinitely superior because of my general. And third, strategy. Therefore, our entire military effort must focus on protecting that one general. It's a really clear, focused line of thought.
Which brings us right to our final lingering question. By identifying Bhishma as his single most important asset and focusing all of his energy on protecting him, was Duryodhana showing brilliant strategic clarity, or was he revealing a fatal over-reliance on one man, a single point of failure that would become the very blueprint for his own defeat? The answer to that, of course, lies in the battle that followed.